So welcome to Conversations with Melissa, presented by RenaFi. RenaFi provides practical, research-based advice courses and peer support, focusing on the underlying drivers of our ADHD behavior. We provide a holistic program that serves to help you thrive with ADHD, not in spite of it. Visit RenaFi, RenaF as in Frank, I.com to learn more about what we have to offer. And remember to check out our YouTube channel for ADHD resources and information.
The first thing to work on is to stop your negative self-talk. And I tell a story in my book about a man, and he said, I work for the worst boss imaginable. He criticizes me all the time and I can't do anything right. And the next thing he said, I'm self-employed. So I said to him, I said, there are in psychology, and this is maybe old school, but they used to, it's called thought stopping. And you become aware that you have that negative self-talk. There's things you pick up something on your desk and really focus on it. But another strategy is to put a rubber band on your wrist. And every time you start that negative self-talk, you snap the rubber band. So it gives you kind of a negative reinforcement for having a negative self-talk. So I said to this man, well, put a rubber band on your wrist and, do this. And a week later, I talked to him. I said, how are you? He said, I have a very sore wrist.
That's a hard learning strategy, the snapping yourself. It is. But I love the way he shared the story with you and you shared it with us about this belligerent boss turns out to be the person themselves. Yeah. I know when we get diagnosed, we think, oh yeah, now I'm diagnosed. Mm-hmm. Isn't it all going to come up roses? So along the lines around diagnosis, do you have any idea how many women are misdiagnosed as depressed rather than the ADHD? Or maybe they are depressed and that's, it just takes a while for the ADHD to reveal itself.
Some people can have both conditions, and they're not, I'm not a doctor. This is just what I've read. So some people end up benefiting from taking medicines for both depression and their ADHD. But it's more commonly thought if they have anxiety that it often resulted from their undiagnosed ADHD, that they never could count on themselves. They never knew when they were going to function well. They made huge efforts to do everything very well. And that huge effort, when things were overwhelming and they still were trying to do things, that's what ended up giving them anxiety. And I don't know if this has changed, and this is what Dr. Dodson said in Attitude, is that this is so discouraging to hear, but people often get tried on 6 medications before they finally get diagnosed with their ADHD.
That's a lot of experimenting.
But that was for depression or for anxiety. They were being treated for the wrong condition and being tried on all these medicines to see if they could improve their functioning. But they weren't diagnosed correctly. And that's the reason they were trying 6 medications. Wow. So once they got diagnosed with the ADHD, again, they might have to try different medications, but there's really only 2. There's over 30 different medications out there, but they're based on the same 2 stimulants. It's just different delivery systems.
The ADHD paralysis, that kind of analysis paralysis, is that a factor of the inattentive type, or is it more universal than that?
What they say, that paralysis is maybe the desire to do something perfectly, and if you haven't figured out how to do it, you're just not going to do it. But I also wonder if it's just that procrastination where it's just hard to get settled down and to pay attention to something that's not very interesting to you.
Well, I can say my husband is not an inattentive type. I called him Tigger when we first met. So that tells you pretty much bouncing around lots of energy. And he gets that. You know, we wanted to replace our television and he researched which sort of TV, this one, that one. This one looks like the best, but this one's more well
Uh,
adopted. And he just got to a place where it was very difficult for him to make the purchase in the end.
so he got too much information and then he couldn't make a decision. We love the research part of doing things. We love to learn new things, but then sometimes we can get ourselves overwhelmed because we learn too much and then we can't organize it.
Yes. So true. So true. We have a question around therapies, like what therapies work for inattentive type. And the person who wrote us the question is saying, what kind of therapy or support works best for inattentive ADHD? And they're thinking cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and I'm not sure what RRT is, so I don't know what it is. Have you any
I,
insights about what are different treatments better for inattentive than?
Years ago, I read that the best therapist, when they did research on different therapy, it turned out that the relationship with the therapist was the most important thing.
Wow.
And Terry Matlin, that we recently interviewed for one of these inattentive videos, she believes people with ADHD undiagnosed need that therapy to help them go back and reframe their life, to go back and forgive themselves for anything where they felt they created an error. Um, y- so, and I know as coaching, cognitive behavioral therapy, I think is helping you with the strategies, looking at the here and now and not going into your history so much as what are you doing and is it helpful? So I think people are going to come down on different sides of that as to what would be helpful.
I just want to say that thing that you had said about the relationship, the trust between you and the therapist, the point of going to therapy, this acceptance of yourself, this reframing, and that those elements that you pointed out are really meaningful and deep and important. And
Well,
sometimes we forget what is the point of the therapy, but that's the point of the therapy.
well, I do think it's important that the therapist be familiar with ADHD because I talked to a woman recently and she's a coach. She could refer her clients for therapists, but she said when she herself had this therapist and she was going weekly and paying a lot for the meetings, one time she forgot. The therapist didn't try to contact her, and she still got billed for the got billed for the
Session.
session that
Yeah.
she didn't show up for. And so she said, you can't work with people with ADHD and act like that. You have to realize they might be late sometimes. You have to give them a little bit of a nudge that I'm here waiting for you. And the other thing, what it brought up for me is years ago when I trained as a social worker, we were told that if a patient is late for a therapy visit, to look on that as desire, denial or resistance to treatment. And once I learned about ADHD, they told me that therapists aren't trained that way anymore because, I mean, all of us are late sometimes to a meeting, and we don't want to think that it means we didn't want to be there. I think we're just going through a shift because the public's concept, most people's concept is that physical hyperactivity is ADHD. And we need to work to broaden that concept, that it's showing up in a myriad of ways. Um, and we've created silos even for us to say inattentive. I'm finding out that people with inattentive could have some impulsive symptoms. They could have hyperactivity sometimes. It could be their predominant way of being, but it's not the exclusive way. So it's not these rigid lines that this is what it is, but I think we need to broaden people's understanding of what ADHD is and how it presents, and the broad impacts it has on people's lives. It's not just a simple thing of forgetting your car keys or not paying your taxes. It has really broad implications. And if you look up Chris Dendy, she years ago created the iceberg of ADHD, and it showed a few symptoms that people recognize on the surface, but it shows all the other things underneath that many people have impacting their lives.
You know, we had done in the RenaFi book club, we had read Falling Through the Ceiling, which is a family memoir, and they used that Chris Dendy iceberg metaphor when they were talking about the ADHD. It's very informative to have these metaphors, something where we can look at a thing that has the iceberg, for example, a little bit's visible, the rest's underneath, that as a great descriptor of ADHD. And then I want to just say in the chat, people are saying this to each other. We want to underline it. I want to underline it, that having your therapist, if you're choosing to go to a therapist, or that they should understand ADHD, that there's some compassion from them, that they are reading the latest, that they're up on it, that they're informed, and they have other clients. The conversation that you had said, you know, that the person got fully charged, no one even pinged them, like what a difference it would make if you just got a phone call, hey, I haven't seen you, or you're not here yet. Which would be, if you were at any other type of appointment and someone didn't show up, that's what they would do. I have another couple questions that came in. One was around diagnosis. I appreciate that you said you're a layperson. I think this question is around other things people can get diagnosed with while they're looking to find out they have ADHD. Bipolar, I know anxiety and depression. Is there overlap with bipolar? Do you have any familiarity with that?
Um, the research, I don't know how to start, but for me, we know there's lots of things that overlap with ADHD, but that's all as far as I'm comfortable saying, because I don't think the research is firm enough. You'll see some people that will say, 50% of people with ADHD have depression, and then you'll read somewhere else that it's 35%. So I don't have confidence in the percentages, but just know that there are some people that have overlaps with all of these different disorders. They could have overlap with OCD or overlap with bipolar. Generally, what I've heard is like there's people, a woman who writes a lot, she's autistic and ADHD. And I asked her, how do you, which silo do you put yourself in? And she said, the one that has the most predominant symptoms for me, the symptoms that trouble me the most. And I think if you went to a psychiatrist and he saw that your depression was the main symptom, that's where they would start with the treatment.
I love what you shared about the woman author who has both ADHD and autism, and that she's looking at what's in the forefront now. That's what I heard you say. And being in the now so we can address what the problem is now. That does seem to be one of the challenges.
Yeah.
for at least for us, the ADHD side of that. We have a couple of questions over here. I think this one dovetails nicely with some of what we were planning to talk about. I found the DIVA-based questionnaire. I felt it was a whole another level of specificity compared to the usual questionnaires like the ASR1 or whatever the name of the other one is. Could we talk about DIVA? Could we talk about the DIVA 5 questionnaire?
What the DIVA did is they went through, and for each of the symptoms from the DSM, which we talked about earlier, they went and listed maybe 5 visual behaviors, and you could check off how many of those that you would have under each symptom. And if you end up with a lot of check marks, then you're more confident. Because if you have more confidence that you're right about your inattentive ADHD, especially women, we're not as assertive as we should be if the doctor says, no, 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 you don't have inattentive, you've got depression, and we're going to treat you for depression. If you had something like this that you knew was valid, it has been shown to be valid for diagnosing ADHD, where its downfall is it doesn't tease out anything else going on with you, but it's been proven valid to be able to diagnose ADHD.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have someone who had put a nice link and they shared it with us as hosts. I am gonna put it back in for people in the room to be able to see this
So it's
resource.
iadhd.org/child for the children's questionnaire, and iadhd/adult for the adult questionnaire.
This is another reason I love RenaFi. I know there's a lot of people who are not, this is their first time meeting RenaFi, so to speak, but this idea where people will share in the chat something that got discussed here, they'll put a link to the resource. That is very common practice in our community, and I love seeing it. That's part of how you know you're in the right place, that people have your back, that the researchers who love to research do it and bring it over to the rest of us so we can keep listening to the conversation. Noticing when you're in the right place is kind of important. So we had a question that's in the Q&A tool. Have school systems started recognizing ADHD as more than behavioral issues? I haven't seen an understanding of executive function and acknowledgement that it's a brain issue. So I'm assuming this is apparent. Have things changed in the school system around it? Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it probably depends on the schools. We had Brendan Mahan, he's one of the interviews, and he's a parent coach for ADHD. He goes out and gives presentations, and he said he's in Massachusetts, and he said they have a very good school system. And so he's going to schools where he gets invited to schools where they're up to date on this and they want to learn about it. But he said, again, the teachers that show up are the teachers that care, and the teachers that need to learn are the ones that don't show up. And also the schools that aren't interested in his information don't invite him. So I think it's just spotty. And parents, we have a woman on our board, she wrote Andrew's awesome adventures about her son with inattentive and the work she had to do with the schools to get, but the school was cooperative. Actually, it was the second grade teacher who told the mother that she thought her son might have a type of ADHD. So I think it can run the gamut. I think our whole culture is moving forward and understanding about neurodivergence and neurodiversity. So yeah, it's evolving.
I think that is a very good answer, that it's evolving, that it depends on your school district, that there are teachers who are tuned in and will clue you in that there's something to notice, and there are some teachers who are just trying to get through the day.